By way of introduction, my name is Mark Cudney. I'm the town manager of town of Wksp Roads. The purpose of this meeting is to attempt to gain public input from both property owners and the general public. In August of 2012, town council had charged the town management staff with the responsibility for coming up with comprehensive plan amendments to both Wksp and Southern Boulevard. In February of this year, we had a workshop right in this room at Southern Boulevard. Unfortunately, we didn't really get the turnout that we had hoped for. And it was recently, as about 2 months ago, town council asked us to try to set up one more workshop. And that's what we're about tonight. We're going to have a very short presentation from the staff. I'll try to get you up to speed to where we're at and where we'd like to go. And then we're going to want to hear from you. I would like to introduce the folks that are here tonight. Our main facilitator is going to be our planning consultant, Jim Fleischman. Jim, raise your hand, or something that works for the town staff. We also have in the back, we have Braden Garrett, our planning technician, and over in that corner, we have Sue Eichhorn, our town clerk. In addition, I'm pleased to introduce to you, and I've met some of these folks just a few minutes ago, but we have folks from Stantec Engineering, who are the consultants for FDOT. With us, we have Maj Alam, we have Tom Ruiz, Sandra Hodge, Regina Lopez, and Patrick Leung. And they are out here as well to provide input and to answer any questions that you may have relative to the recent pond siting effort that's been underway that they've been working on. Or I guess you guys can address questions about the 6 lanes of Southern. So with that, they're here as a resource, and you can certainly ask them any questions. So with that, after we get through all that, though, we set up a table. If you want to come up here, tell us what you want to tell us about what you think Southern Boulevard, what should happen to it, you know, where it should go, how much commercial, length, all that kind of good stuff. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim, and he's going to just give a brief overview of what we've been doing and issues of Southern Boulevard.
Okay, thanks, Mark. As a result of a couple major activities, such as the future widening of Southern Boulevard by DOT and some large-scale future land use plan amendments by the town along Southern Boulevard, those two events have created interest among property owners to take a look at what the comprehensive plan says about land use along the Southern Boulevard corridor in terms of making a determination as to whether or not the current comprehensive plan still represents an appropriate policy direction for the corridor, or whether or not we might need to make some changes to better reflect the current conditions and the likely future conditions resulting from the widening and the future land use plan amendments that were recently made. Mark mentioned that the workshop that we had in February was not very well attended. Staff certainly made every effort to get the word out to the town residents. For this meeting, we sent individual letters to all of the property owners along the corridor. We advertised the workshop in the Conference Post and the Town Crier, posted a public notice at the Town Hall Administrative Office, and posted notice on the town's website. So we certainly made every attempt to get the word out to all property owners and residents along the corridor.
Jim?
Yeah.
Y'all do intend to videotape and put this on the website or the YouTube?
Yes, I guess if you look back there, there's
Because I think a lot of people
camera rolling.
have found that as a useful alternative.
Sure. Okay, that's a good point. Thank you, John. I want to make sure everyone has signed in at the back there, and if you haven't signed in, please do so before you leave. The primary objective of the meeting tonight is, as Mark mentioned, is to allow residents and property owners along the corridor to provide input to the town staff in terms of existing land use issues, which we'll get into a little bit more detail later in the workshop, as they relate to potential land use and comprehensive plan amendments that might be necessary. And as Mark said, we do have representatives from Stantec, the consultants for the DOT widening of Southern Boulevard, available to answer questions. We have a spot reserved in the presentation so that you can ask them specific questions. There are two handouts that we provided at the sign-in table, and these handouts will assist you in following certain parts of the discussion. The first handout contains a quarter map, statements of existing land use policy from the comprehensive plan as it relates to land use in the Southern Boulevard corridor, a future land use map indicating what the town currently has planned for properties within the corridor. And we also have 3 existing land use maps, as well as a parcel by parcel inventory showing and identifying agricultural lands, commercial parcels, and residential parcels within the corridor. And we also have a brief analysis of the AR zoning district and commercial zoning districts, which are the 2 principal zoning districts that are applied to property within the corridor. The second handout is actually the handout that was mailed out to property owners within the corridor, asking a series of questions related to land use within the corridor. Staff is looking to make a determination as to whether or not the property owners feel that land use is adequately addressed in the corridor, and if not, what kinds of changes residents and property owners might propose. This slide here shows the corridor. For the purposes of the workshop and the purposes of planning activities in the corridor, we've defined the corridor as consisting of the entire extent of the town of Waxahachie Groves from east to west, and extending from Southern Boulevard up to through Collecting Canal. This area includes approximately just over 600 acres and 132 different parcels of land. This table shows a brief summary of the existing land uses in the corridor. The table was put together essentially from 2 sources. Property appraisers' data that assigned the land use category to each of the parcels. And we adjusted it somewhat to show recent future land use plan amendment activity that the town is undertaking. For example, the second land use down, the MLU, Palm Beach County Property Appraiser, has that shown as agriculture, but the town has recently approved a land use plan amendment that is assigned commercial office, commercial low, and institutional uses to that 90-acre parcel. So this incorporating some of the town's recent land use changes better reflects planned, existing and planned land uses along the corridor. From this, you can see that agriculture, as designated by the property appraiser, constitutes far and away the largest land use category within the corridor at the present time. Other large land uses include the multiple land use parcel. That's the northeast corner of B Road and Southern Boulevard. Residential built acres is 81. Palm Beach State College, PBSC vacant, represents 75 acres. That's at the northwest corner of B and Southern. And then we have various other uses, including commercial vacant and residential vacant. This slide here shows the locations of the agricultural designated properties. As I mentioned, these are the properties that are designated agriculture by the Palm Beach County Property Appraiser. The large piece at the northeast corner, the L-shaped piece at the northeast corner of B and Southern, that is the property that currently has the multiple land use designation resulting from a recent Palm Beach Wksp Grove land use plan. The property appraiser has assigned 5 different agricultural land use categories within the corridor, consisting of crops, grazing, orchard and groves, equestrian, and ornamental miscellaneous, and that usually means wholesale nurseries. In terms of acreage allocated to the different agricultural uses, we've got 87 acres of crops, and that's all within the westernmost parcel on the property that is commonly known as the guest property. It's 82 acres of grazing, 5 acres of orchard and groves, 81 acres of equestrian, and ornamental, 52 acres. This slide here shows the location of the existing residential development within the corridor. Of note is the town has one residential zoning district. That's the AR, Agricultural Residential District, with a minimum lot size of 5 acres. Now, if you look at those properties, 92% of the properties in the corridor are on properties smaller than 5 acres. As a matter of fact, 51% of the residential properties are less than 1/2 acre in size. The 52 residential lots have a total of 59 residential lots that have a total of 61 dwelling units, and in addition to the 61 dwelling units, there's an additional 21 dwelling units that are located on parcels that were designated agricultural. So in total, there are 82 residential units within the corridor. Major concentrations of residential development essentially north of Tangerine, just west of D Road, and on the north side of Tangerine between D and E roads. And finally, we have the location of all of the commercial parcels around the corridor. The parcels that are colored in solid colors are existing developed commercial parcels. The parcels that are outlined are vacant parcels which have received future land use designations of commercial. The crosshatched parcel is the multiple land use parcel that I referenced earlier. That parcel has an approval, but not by the town council, of 103,000 square feet of retail, 44,000 square feet of office, and 120-bedded assisted living facility on the north. Also, one of the conditions of approval of that property is that it dedicates a 300-foot conservation easement in perpetuity as part of the rezoning process that it is currently undergoing. Just a brief presentation on Southern Boulevard. Southern Boulevard is classified as an urban principal arterial road and is part of the state's strategic intermodal system, which is a system of interstate highways, major roadways, airports, and ports that are key to Florida's economy and its emergency management system. Current traffic counts on Southern Boulevard are from Seminole Pratt to B Road, 28,400 vehicles per day. From B Road to F Road, 32,200 vehicles per day. And from F Road to Crestwood, 45,500 vehicles per day. DOT currently has plans to expand the roadway from its existing 4 lanes to 6 lanes from Line Country Safari to Crestwood Boulevard. And the current projected construction date, at least the most current information I have, is fiscal year 2018. I'd like to introduce Tom and his group, just to give you a very brief overview of where the project is and to answer any questions on the widening that you may have. Tom?
Yeah. Thank you, Jim, and thanks for inviting us to this meeting so that we can also do something important about this project. Standard, we are all from Standard, as Mark mentioned, that we are working on behalf of DOT for the designing of State Road 80, which is, as Jim said, the project begins from west of Line Country Safari to Forest Hill, Crestwood Boulevard. So main idea of this project is that we're gonna widen it from 4 lane to 6 lane. So from the Line Country Safari to B Road, we're gonna be adding the lane in the median, because the median is wide enough. So 1 lane gonna be added in the median. And from the B Road to all the way to Forest Hill, we're gonna be adding from the eastbound direction, the additional lane will be added to the median. And the westbound direction, we're gonna be adding the lane to the north side. For purpose of the roadway improvement, DOT is not looking to purchase any right of way. However, due to the widening for the drainage, we need some offside drainage. So to offside drainage, we have been going through some pond siting and we selected some ponds to mitigate some drainage impact that Tom gonna be explaining a little bit later more into the pond siting process and how we did that. So right now, we are actually in the 60% level, working towards 60% submittal, which is coming up in end of October or beginning of November to DOT. And we look forward to finalize the design of this State Road 80, which is pretty much end of next year. And as Jim mentioned, that we are currently the DOT anticipate the construction going to begin in 2018. However, there is another, if DOT got found for the design, this project may kick in a little early. So that we do not know yet. The information we know is that will be constructed in 2018 fiscal year. Okay. And currently, we are also anticipating that we're going to, from the State Road 80 project, we're going to have a public workshop meetings to involve the residents and the public to inform what actually we're going to be, constructing. So I think we are looking forward to something middle of next year, that public hearing, public workshop. Going to be some in the middle of next year. So now, Tom, you can talk about some pond siting.
Thank you, Max. Yeah, good evening. I'm Tom Ruiz. I worked on the pond siting. I was involved in the project development and environment study. It's a PD&E that started way back in 2009. So that was a planning level study. At that time, we looked at over 30 sites for ponds. What's happening on State Road 80 is that Currently, the roadside swales are being used for water quality treatment. So currently, runoff from the road falls into those swales, kind of sits there, infiltrates into the ground, and then once it stages up high enough, it outfalls out to the C-51 canal. So that's what's happening today. Now, when Madge comes in and widens the road, now he's going to widen the road into the swale. So not only are we going to lose treatment because the road is now going to be in the swale, we're also adding additional lanes of traffic, which now we need to provide additional treatment. We need to provide additional water quality treatment for that additional impervious area. So what ends up happening is that, given the limited right-of-way, we end up having to go off-site in order to provide ponds to meet water quality standards. Now, as Madge said, the roadway itself, the main line, won't need any right-of-way acquisition, but we will need right-of-way acquisition for pond sites. Now, as I said, the pond siting team evaluated over 30 sites for the corridor, and the pond siting team is put together by FDOT. It has members of roadway, it has members of environmental scientists, it has construction people, it has attorneys, it has right-of-way maintenance. So it's got all kind of experts, and it's got drainage as well. All of these experts get together and they evaluate each pond site based on a list of criteria, and they do their best to assign a score based on how that site specifically meets the needs of their discipline. So for example, if I'm a drainage guy, I see a nice soggy low spot and I want to put my pond right there, then the environmental counterpart may come and say, hey, hold on, that's environmentally sensitive. Don't put your pond there because you're going to contaminate that. So it goes back and forth, and then the construction guy may say, hey, look, if you put your pond there, we're never going to be able to construct that because you've got these utilities and you've got all these other issues. So when you're looking at a site to put a pond, there are a lot of things that you've got to consider so that you can make a good decision for the taxpayer and for DOT. So based on those 30 sites, 5 of them were ultimately selected, 1 per basin. And those landowners have been contacted, and we're in the process of getting the information from them. Just to let you know, the pond sizes range anywhere from 2 acres to 5 acres, depending on what's going on and how big the contributing area is. When you talk about a pond, there are 2 basic flavors. You can have a dry pond, it just looks like a depression. You drive by it, and sometimes you don't even know it's there, it just looks like a depression. And then you can have a wet pond, where there's water in it most of the time. Those are the 2 basic flavors. Depending on the feasibility of getting the water to the pond, some of the ponds may be dry and some of them may be wet. Just because what happens is State Road 80 is basically flat. And from a drainage standpoint for the roadway, everything moves by gravity. So if you put your pond too far from the corridor, then you need to have enough gravity to move the water. You need to have enough longitudinal slope to move the water. If you put it too far from your area, what may happen is you may end up getting severe flooding in your area before it actually gets to the pond. So the location of the pond and whether we are able to make it dry or wet depends really on the characteristics and the contributing basin. Now, there are a couple ways that these ponds can go in. DOT can flat out acquire the land, be simple. So the landowner says, okay, fine, we'll sell you the land. DOT comes in, puts their pond, puts a fence around it, or not fence, depending on how the town feels. I know we have had some discussions with the town, whether they want a fence or they don't want a fence. That'll be up to the town. But basically, DOT will build a pond. That's DOT's pond. Nobody's supposed to be in there. That's DOT property. So that's flavor 1. Flavor 2 is what's called a joint use pond. where sometimes a landowner may say, look, I was kind of planning on putting a pond there, or I don't really want to lose that much space, or, you know, if you're already going to build a pond and it's already going to be 2 acres, how about we build it 3 acres or 4 acres, and we can take care of both of our drainage. And it's kind of a win-win for DOT, because then, you know, the community has, it's not impacted as much because there's a pond and some of the community is using it, and typically in the joint use ponds, you'll have some landscaping incorporated because it's actually part of the bigger development. So DOT is flexible. To go into a joint use pond, it's a little trickier because, you know, the DOT needs the pond, so they need to have a pond there. Sometimes the site owner may not be ready at this moment to develop the land, but they may have to do some upfront initial, at least site planning to kind of figure out, okay, we're going to need a 2-acre pond, it's going to have to be here, and then, so there's a bit of coordination between DOT and the landowner for a joint use pond, but in the end, it can be very beneficial. And then, you know, the last way is that the landowner can just flat out say, no, you're not putting your pond here, and then at that point, DOT will have to evaluate whether they want to go through the condemnation process or not, depending on other circumstances. And there's a whole series of things they have to weigh out whether they do that or not. But they have done it, and they've chosen in other times not to do it. So it's not real clear. You know, once you get to that zone, it's not clear what's going to happen. So that's what's going on from a pond siting. From pond siting, we have narrowed it down to the 5 ponds. At the moment, DOT is looking at those 5 ponds and then potentially alternates in case those 5 kind of fall out. If there's something wrong environmentally or something catastrophically wrong with that selection, you know, they can evaluate whether to proceed and fix that site or whether to go to site number 2. So that's where DOT is right now with pond sites. And
Is it okay, Tom, if I identify where the 3 pond sites are in the town?
Sure, and there's 5 of them actually.
I think there's just 3 in.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's down. Yeah, I'm sure there's 5 of them.
If you want to take a look at page 8 of the handouts, that's the map that has the commercial properties on it. 3 of the 5 pond sites are physically in the town of Wksp. Starting from west to east, you see the property identified as number 2. Directly to the west of that is the Palm Beach State College site, and the area in the front of the college along Southern Boulevard is one of the identified sites. The second site, if you look at the property identified as number 14, that's an approved office development, Southern Crossing. The second site is just a little bit to the west of that property. And then going farther to the east, if you look at property number 17, that's the Everglades Farm Equipment. If you're familiar with that site, there's a large vacant property immediately to the east of that. That's the third identified site at this time.
When you say number 14, that's here,
Yeah,
correct? You say there's something to the,
west of that.
that's here.
It's in there, yes.
Okay.
Are there any questions for the consultants?
Just a quick question, on the accelerated construction program, what's the determining factor on there?
Basically, the funding.
If the funding is accelerated,
Yes,
you can move that up.
yeah. So
Is
that
there,
one.
is there a political push to do that?
No, basically if the funding because is available, then political push will happen. If funding is not there, then I think may not happen.
We've been hearing some rumors back and forth that there's there's a push to accelerate it, so I'm just questioning whether that's true.
Yeah, I mean, that's tied with the funding, so.
I'm not clear. Are you aware of anything that is in motion today to accelerate the funding?
No, we're not aware of that. And at the moment, there's nothing in motion that we're aware of to accelerate it. But once the design plans are ready, even though the construction is 2018, it could go design build, depending on if funding becomes available. DOT adjusted funding on a yearly basis. So it could happen.
But your designs aren't due until the end of next year, correct?
Yeah.
End of this year.
End of this year or next year?
End of next year is the final one. But let's do the scenario if the fund is available for design build. Right now, end of this year, we will be finishing, we will be completing 60% of the plan, which is sufficient for the DOT to put in the design. They don't need us to go further evaluate, so they can use that plan to put in the bid for the design build contractor. They will come and bid it based on that design. And they will have maybe 4 months from the time they win the project to design and finalize the plan and just start building.
So it's possible that construction can start in 2014.
It would, it depends on the funding, yes. That's, yes.
A comment and a question. The comment is, thank you for choosing that middle site there, just west of Ponce 14. That's one I liked for a long time because it reduces the amount of potential commercial along us breaking up the quote-unquote strip, and it also protects the residents just behind it. Now the question is, you've got these 3 ponds scattered out, you're losing the swale. So how do you do east-west transfer of the water from the road to the ponds without a swale?
Yeah, it's tricky, it's tricky. Yeah, what happens is, today the swales are being used as a treatment area. They're wide, and they're also being used to convey to the inlets. What's happening in the final design is because the roadway is going into the swale, we're losing most of the swale, but we're going to keep just enough of the swale to allow us to convey the water back and forth. So what ends up happening is, to give you an idea, right now, your swales out there have a bottom width, the bottom width of them, anywhere from 12 feet to 20 feet. What's going to happen in the ultimate is that you're going to have a bottom width of maybe anywhere from 4 feet to 6 feet. Or towards the ends, it may taper out, so you may go from maybe 2 feet to 6 feet, with an average of about 4 feet bottom width. So there will be more narrow. We can still use it for conveyance, but we really can't provide any storage there.
And I just wanted to say for the record that I spoke with you, and that there are some of those along here who are in these ponds that are being located that have concerns about how it'll impact their future building or some of the plans that they have. And you've also said that you are going to be willing to work with them on the joint use option so that we can make the, because we want this to work for everybody. We want the best drainage and best outcome, but it is going to impact some of these. And so if we can work together, I strongly encourage you to continue to move forward to make sure that those who do have questions, that we can work this into what they need and it'll work for everyone. So I just wanted to make that clear for everyone. Thank you.
And if you need to get a hold of me, I'm the drainage guy. There's cards up here. And if you don't grab a card or you forget, you can always ask Mark. He's got our contact information as well.
And for the joint use pond, I would just give a suggestion that if anybody wants to move forward with that, I encourage that better to start the coordination early. There is a lot of coordination needs to take place to finalize all those legal tie-in, because our plan is moving forward. So as we move forward, it's going to be hard to move back because the schedule from the DOT standpoint is very critical, because all the schedule is based on their planning and based on their funding. So that's why I will, encourage if anyone wants to, join this bond, please move forward. Let us know that we can facilitate that thing.
At one point, the Water Control District engineer was working, I believe, with you gentlemen about an alternative to reduce the number of ponds and to work a way to drain, even if it involves some pumping, into a town lake closer to Collecting Canal that would also have a conveyance into our canal, the Collecting Canal. Now, is that totally out, or is that still an option?
Yeah, we did do that, and the town was also involved in our pond siting meetings. We evaluated that, and at this point, it's not an option.
Why?
It didn't score well in the end. As I said, the pond siting team is not one person making a decision based on a certain set of criteria. It's looking at the project from the grand scale. How are you going to maintain this site? How are you going to get the water there? How are you going to build the site? Environmentally, all those things that are going to happen, and that option was evaluated, but ultimately it was not determined to be the best.
Here's your problem. I see it. Southern Boulevard is our prime commercial corridor, number one. There's no question that if you put a pond right next to the road, you don't have to move the water very far. There's no question that you can make better use of gravity to do that. But all you guys are on the outside. We trust that you heard our concerns, but it's our town, and it looks like you guys just decided to dump all these ponds and all this water into our town and to take up what we were evaluating as planning to be the commercial corridor of the town. Now, to me, I'm not sure what the give-ups and gets are, but it seems to us like you're doing it your way, not our way. And I'm not sure that just the obvious cheaper cost from your standpoint should be controlling evaluation factors if we had given a lot of planning thought to a town trail and lake closer to Collecting Canal, and we could accomplish enough land in what we were planning. I mean, we were planning like a corridor alongside Collecting Canal that would be like a longitudinal lake that would tie into some trails, and that would give you the ability to purify the water, and to the extent that you had a problem, it would give you a release into the canal. Now, I don't know that, in the event of a really big flood, that your ponds aren't going to contribute to some flooding, whereas our canal does have release under emergency conditions into C51. Now, do you have an emergency C51 release out of your ponds into C51, or is it just going to flood the areas near the ponds?
Okay, I'll try and answer all of that. If I miss something,
Sure.
keep me honest. Okay, starting from the back, do we have emergency release into C51? The answer is yes. What's happening? Right now, there are inlets, in some cases, maybe every 1,000 feet or so, into the C51. So what our approach is to keep those inlets going directly into the C51. And what we're going to do is we're going to raise the grates of them higher. So what's going to happen is when you get the smaller storms, the swales, the conveyance swales, are going to work, and they're going to channel water into the pond. Now, when the big storm comes, the swales will fill up. And then at that point, because those grade elevations are higher, those inlets will then start discharging directly into the C-51 canal. Now, that's important, because what happens is that option that you were talking about would have us discharging into collecting canal. So collecting canal is kept higher than the C-51. So even when there's a hurricane coming or a big weather storm, when South Florida Water Management decides to draw the canal down, the collecting canal, the canals of Loxahatchee Groves, still remain higher for some period of time.
Believe me,
Well,
that's part of our planning for flood events. We watch the weather just like South Florida Water Management. We draw those canals down before the event.
I understand, and we have seen those pumps pumping.
It's all gravity, you take it down.
Okay, we've seen that, but the gauge data, based on gauge data that's out there, available on the South Florida Water Management District website, they have gauges out there, and you can see the stage elevations in Collecting Canal and C-51.
Yeah.
Typically, before the storm, during the storm, and after the storm, the C-51 is going to be lower than Collecting Canal, typically. And from a roadway standpoint, State Road 80 is an emergency evacuation route. Our main objective is to keep the roadway dry. During the normal storm, the average every day, yes, those ponds are going to work, we're going to have beautifully clean water, everything's going to be fine. But when the big storm comes, our main priority is to make sure that that roadway is going to be able to drain. The problem with having a pond or having a system that's going to push all that stuff out backwards would be that our ultimate outfall, one of our ultimate outfalls would be the collecting canal, even for the smaller storms. So what that ends up happening is it created more of a potential to have ponding or to have flooding on State Road 80, even when it wasn't a big storm.
I don't fully understand that because the purpose of collecting canal is to tie into 3 exits into C-51 at A Road and B Road and Folsom. And it seems to me that what you're doing is you're taking this new, much greater water runoff that was in some swales now that weren't affecting Loxahatchee Groves, and you're going to dump all of that into these ponds, which is a greater water volume because of a greater road surface and a diversion of the current swales. It's a greater water volume than we have to deal with now. And if all you've got are these little inlets, one of the problems we had with Hurricane Isaac was C-51 was not taken down ahead of the storm. So if those inlets are blocked by the level of water in C-51, which slowed our exit out of our normal outlets, it seems to me you exacerbated the flooding for us. Whereas if you did work with the town on that longitudinal pond and trail alternative near the collecting canal, we'd have a greater ability to adjust water flow in anticipation of a real serious event, because we do draw down the canals ahead of serious events as a precaution. Now, your ponds, whether they're joint use ponds or whether they're dry ponds, you know, they are what they are. You can't draw them down, and you can't convey water out of them once it starts building up. So I'm thinking that safety of the town, purpose of the commercial corridor in the town, and an alternate plan which is feasible at not too much, I don't think, additional cost, with the ability to adjust for storms, is an alternative that ought to still be a viable alternative, rather than just deciding, okay, we've looked at all the factors that I'm sure you've looked at as very valid factors, but you guys are looking at it from the standpoint of solving your problems, and we've tried to step in your shoes while we're still in our shoes and say, you know, flooding safety, viable alternative, benefit to the town, if we could work with you all on a longitudinal joint use pond where you could construct the water conveyance into that pond, and it would be intended to be, you know, a wet pond with an overflow.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. I'm Bill Allen, I'm an environmental chemistry professor at Florida Atlantic University. I'm a member of the Roadway Trails and Equestrian Greenway Committee for the town. This pond has not been vetted through our committee that he's talking about, and I strongly object to it ever even being considered for a couple of reasons. One, we got roadway runoff. Say we have a diesel truck have a wreck during an Isaac. Okay? Now that water is going to go to this longitudinal lake that probably has fish in it. It's supposed to be an amenity. If we ever do one for our trail system, it's supposed to be an amenity for the people here. And the other thing about this gravity draining that Mr. Ryan has gone through is I will guarantee you, if you take the altitude of the bottom of the collecting canal, even after it's cleaned out, it's still above the mean level of C51. See, dry out, take a completely dry collecting canal, it's above C51. You can drive around and see that, you don't have to measure it. Okay? So that, and conveying water from the road all the way out to collecting canal is probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of, period.
Now, were you finished? I didn't mean to have him cut you off.
Yeah, I think Bill had plenty of opportunity to bring up his concerns before. I don't know exactly why he's bringing them up now. I think the idea of water conveyance to a joint use pond is and has been thoroughly discussed. And if he's just late to the party, he's just late to the party. Now, his objections ought to be considered, but I don't think that alternative has been given a fair vetting.
Let me just make a statement for everybody here, so they, maybe I can say something that they can say, so we know. But they did include us in the process, and they did work. Stantec and FDOT did work. I can tell you that the town was well represented in the meetings. Councilman Golsonet, Vice Mayor Gerald, Jim Fleischman, myself, even Mark Perry, Joe Lavonic. A lot of folks showed up at those meetings. As Tom had indicated, there was a very intricate matrix which this team of experts that they had used in order to determine where these ponds would be located. Now, you know, the town was there representing its interest, trying to make sure that prime commercial, potential commercial, was not exacerbated by a pond location. Another thing the town was trying to do was to ensure that possibly if a joint use situation was available, we would certainly be willing to work with FDOT there, because there were some advantages for the town if we could work on a joint use site, including the town possibly getting a site for a future facility or whatever the case may be. So we worked very closely. The issue, as I see it, and as some others see it, is that possibly the criteria that the team had to use provided more points, if you will, from a maintenance standpoint. If the ponds were closer than further away, there were some environmental issues that impacted one site over another. One site that the town liked very much as a joint use site ended up having some environmental issues, so that knocked us out of the running as it related to where pond locations were going to happen. But then FDOT has their own way of doing things, and so these guys provided the technical data to them, and then FDOT made their choices. So I just want everybody that's here to understand that the town wasn't asleep at the wheel in terms of trying to protect commercial properties along Southern Boulevard. And I'm sure these folks will still work with us. If there's a problem, we will have ample opportunity to weigh in. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
I guess what I'm saying is that with all the background that we had, it seems that that was not one of the 30 evaluated options, and now it's been totally rejected.
No, actually, those I can show you. This is actually our matrix. After the meeting, I can show you in person. All of the property along the collecting canal, that the potential what we evaluated during the PD&E, we also evaluated during the design phase. The pond setting team again, and the factor for the willingness and the convenience for the town is being considered, because we had a we had one of the criteria that's for like public interest or dislike. So that factor was incorporated into our metrics, and also the joint use. For joint use also had a more point of it. But as Mark and Tom was saying, that some of the pond didn't get scored because of the environmental sensitive area, because of mostly the land close to the connecting canal has an environmentally sensitive area. And also the maintenance and the construction cost, both those all factors play in role. If you like to see those details, we can work with you and show you actually how much effort we put to see actually, and personally, and actually Tom and me, we had a passion to see if we can have some joint pond, especially about the connecting canal. We personally tried, but the factor, the way the result came out to be the way it is. But if you like to see, we can show you the detailed result of it. Thank you.
The last statement I'll make on this, we're aware that Lee Wright had offered his property to the town for other purposes that, adjoins Collecting Canal. It's basically a cleared out grazing area now. It's 15 acres. 15 acres, I think, would be bigger than 3 combined pond sites. That would be more in line with a alternative that might give them even greater land area for environmental purposes, but still keep it in the context of maybe a recreational.
John, Mr. Wright's site was considered, but I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, you have to locate one pond in each basin.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they couldn't do that.
Well, they
because
could use one location.
Couldn't use one location, correct?
Right. What happens is everything is so flat out there, that if you put one pond far away from the basins, you'd have to flood in the basins before the water would make it over to the pond. So that's a problem. But we did consider Mr. Wright's property. That was one of the joint use ponds considered.
Since we're just rolling the talk, one other thing I object to, I already mentioned the potential spill on that, is if we have a pond that potentially overflows into Collecting Canal, just think of what is recharging the aquifer where your well water comes from. You get a contamination off the road into a pond that's right connected that overflows into Collecting Canal. Collecting Canal goes into our canal system. Our canal system charges my drinking water, your drinking water.
Yeah, but Bill, we have trucks going Collecting Canal all the time.
And that's kind of what happened, actually, when you've got competing interests. That's what happened in our pond siting meetings. Environmental guys look at it one way, drainage guy looks at it another way, maintenance looks at it another way. So it's back and forth, and it's tough to make these calls on where you're going to put these ponds. But ultimately, we had to make a call, and that's the direction.
Kevin, just let me make one comment too. Before your comment, these gentlemen are here. They'll be happy if there are specific questions about the pond sites. I'm sure we can step out in the sidebar meeting. What we'd like to do after your comment is get into your comments related to land use along Southern and giving us the input we need to move forward. But go ahead.
Just off the question, kind of bouncing off of Bill out of there for a second. The ponds that are located along Southern Boulevard, they don't have liners underneath them, do they?
No.
So in other words, any leaching of material would happen anyway into an aquifer from that location, is that correct?
The leaching of material, like
Any sort of material in a pond that has no liner underneath it would still leach down into an aquifer, is that correct?
Dig a post hole and see which way the water flows. It's going south-southeast.
Okay, that's all, thanks.
Ask a geologist. A hydro.
Any last questions before we go into land use?
And just to reiterate, DOT will have another public outreach where DOT will be hosting the actual event. We'll have big boards to show exactly what's happening, but this is all information that's been put out since the PD&E, since the Product Development Environment Study. I believe, Sandy, we had 3 meetings, right? 3 public meetings?
Yes, we did. Our public hearing, the final meeting took place in December of 2011, and I recognize quite a few of you who attended that meeting there. And we're going to hold another meeting similar, and probably in the same place that we did it at the Banks Forest Country Club, because that's the place that holds most people, unless there's a new place in town that I don't know about. If I I recognize most of you, we do a buffer for a mailing list, and this area about 1,500 feet in from the roadway. If you don't think that you fall within that, I have my cards here. Please leave me your name and address, and I will be happy to add it to the mailing list. But most likely, I have you, or I will have you once I pull a new list from the property appraisers of the site.
Just in case, if you haven't gotten anything from DOT and you want to get added to the list, then just take her card.
And we're also going to be meeting with the Maxahachie Grove Landowners Association in February of next year, when we'll be further along and have more developments that we can share with you at that point.
Okay.
You all set?
And I mean, land use comments, go ahead.
Yeah, well, but I just want to give a couple more introductory comments. In addition to DOT, the town itself is going to be embarking on some road improvements in the corridor as well. B Road will be surfaced from Southern Boulevard to Collecting Canal as a result of conditions of approval that are in the process of being assigned to projects, the multiple land use project, and also the East State College and the shopping center located at the corner. There's going to be some intersection improvements and surfacing of B Road up to Collecting Canal. Over on F Road, F is going to be surfaced from Southern Boulevard to Collecting Canal in the near future as a result of the Grove Medical Office Building, which is currently under construction. The town, in its capital improvements program for the upcoming year, has programmed money to surface D Road and also improve it to the extent that it would qualify for a traffic signal, and at the same time are going to be attempting to put as much pressure as possible on D Road to include a traffic signal when they do the Southern Boulevard improvements. Oh yeah, that's right. One of the issues related to to whether or not a traffic light is warranted is the amount of traffic that is generated on D Road. DOT is going to be doing some additional traffic counts on D Road this coming November to help make the determination as to whether or not the traffic light is warranted or not. And the town, council staff is going to be working hard to try to convince DOT to include that improvement in the right of also, E Road, as part of a previous approval, has a requirement in there that when the Southern Crossing, the commercial development is built, that E Road also be surfaced from Southern Boulevard to Collecting Canal. So several activities, either town activities or developer activities as a result of development approvals, are in the works to make several surfacing improvements to the north-south roads.
Is it the same company that already did the roads in there that's going to come and do surfacing?
I'm not sure that that's been determined yet.
I'm curious because I was wondering if the same company came in and didn't have to take all the speed bumps along. So actually you're saying, if I drive up North Road or D Road, I put my cruise control on 30 miles an hour and go over all of them. If I go down C Road over 20, it wants to rip the bottom of my car.
Well,
It'd be nice if they were all uniform.
Well, on that account, let me just say, council has discussed at previous meetings the possibility of having our traffic consultants do a study on the speeders. So, haven't been given the green light to go ahead, but they have talked about doing it.
okay. Now to the issue of land use. This slide
Our Stantec folks are going to leave. If anybody wants to catch them on the way out the door, if they have any last questions,
Yeah,
please.
we will be out for a few minutes before it's
Just don't beat us up all.
I want to thank you guys for coming. We appreciate your participation.
We'll leave some business cards up here in case you get hold of us.
Okay, this slide shows the town's future land use map. And you can see that within the corridor, the predominant use is rural residential 5, which is a residential land use category, and the corresponding zoning district is AR, agricultural residential. Now, there's as part of the handout package, there's a summary of the uses that are allowed in the agricultural residential zoning district. Another observation is most of the commercial is in either in a narrow strip along the southern area between C and E, or within multiple land use that's associated with the crosshatch area, or the 22-acre parcel at the northwest corner of B Road and so in terms of policy in the comprehensive plan that address future land use, we're looking primarily at commercial policies that encourage the development of a rural-style commercial center along the Southern Boulevard corridor. And there's policy there to limit commercial development to areas south of East Citrus Drive. There's a policy to endorse a substantial equestrian facility in the vicinity of the town park along Southern Boulevard. And also the policy oriented to extending Tangerine from A Road to E Road. Now, based on a couple recent land use decisions on the part of the town council, that particular policy is no longer possible. At its ultimate potential, Tangerine can no longer extend west of B Road because of the approval of the college. There's going to be an entrance to the college and an entrance to the shopping center that match up with Tangerine Road on the east side of B, but the roadway will not extend beyond the shopping center and serve more than an entrance to the college. There's also an issue of Tangerine between C and D in terms of ownership and whether or not that can actually happen. So that's a policy that probably needs to be revisited. There also has been some discussion on the part of the council as to whether or not the town still wants to create an east-west road on the north side of Southern. And there was considerable discussion at the previous workshop from residents on the north side of Tangerine as to whether or not they would be willing to support an extension of Tangerine based on cut-through traffic. Comprehensive plan also has special policies in it on the northeast corner of B Road, as I mentioned, that relate to the multiple land use category, and also has a special policy related to the state college. policies in the recreation and open space element, as they relate to the corridor, encourages a public equestrian facility at the Wksp Park, encourages greenway and trails systems throughout the town, including areas along collecting canal. I think that's consistent with the RETAG Committee's recommendations, and also to pursue connections between the trails and other parks in the area. Keith?
The encouragement of the equine facility, I guess, is in regards to resolution 2007-007, which was basically asking Palm Beach County to do that. From what my interpretation is, location would require, I would think, a minimum of 15 acres, if not more. Where do you propose to put this in the corridor?
I think the policy relates to incorporating the equestrian facility within the park.
Within the park?
Yeah. I think that's the way the policy reads.
Okay. Thank you. Also, connections with the trails between Wellington and Waxahachie roads going across an increased size DOT improvement project. It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not that can ever happen is certainly a question.
But there doesn't seem to be any other activity other than suggesting that that's a desire. I guess we need to get the equestrian community on board.
Well, yeah. That I mean, if that's going to happen, I think that's an issue that our RETAG committee would have to address to determine whether or not that is still a possibility, whether or not that should remain in the.
Thank you.
Now, as I mentioned right in the beginning of the presentation, we have a handout that has a series of questions in it that are asking property owners and residents in the corridor how they feel about certain issues and whether or not they have any suggestions for changes to the comprehensive plan to better address certain issues. The six topics or issues that I have here are essentially the main issues that are listed in that questionnaire. We certainly would like everyone in attendance to fill out the questionnaire and get it back to Town Hall so that staff could utilize it in determining whether or not there's a need for any comprehensive plan amendments.
On a property owner on a C road, and I know that if I understanding right, the commercial development is going, multiple use commercial development is going on from Southern to Collecting Canal. And what my interest would be to see the multiple use designation be used on areas to the south or northeast of C Road, similar to what is done to the west of us. And I'd like to see if that's a possibility and if that could be entertained to Collecting Canal.
That certainly is a possibility. As a matter of fact, that ties in with the last discussion topic, which really kind of summarizes all of the topics. What staff is suggesting at this point, or asking residents and property owners to consider whether or not they are interested in creating the super block plans, for lack of a better term. And Tom?
Could I ask you about the super block plan? If, would that enable you to say that you would have a future land use designation for a particular block based on what the people in that block would want?
That is definitely a possibility, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Now,
Would they have to go through the application process to get that, or is there a way to do that more simply right here? Because there's a lot of folks that are part of these two either side of D Road super blocks that are here tonight.
yeah, well, I think it's possible to do it either way. Now, I think up to this point, not all of the changes to the comprehensive plan have been the result of privately initiated applications. And I think to a certain extent that should continue to be the case. However, I think as a precursor to that, I think that we can incorporate language into the comprehensive plan up front that makes that process simpler than it is now. We have a section in the comprehensive plan, we have an objective that allows the creation of special policies in the comprehensive plan that relate either to specific parcels or relates to specific issues. So, for example, if the property owners in what I'm going to call super block C to D, that's the property owners in the area north of Southern, south of Licking Canal, from C to D, get together and make the collective determination that we would like to create a plan for this super block consisting of the following. We can put language in the comprehensive plan that leads to a privately initiated application that could go through the process relatively simply. Although I do think that the application still should be privately initiated. So there would be some expense. The language in the comprehensive plan, as I said, could make that process simple. And part of the reason that I went through the exercise of looking at the agricultural parcels maps in the handout, the residential maps, and the commercial maps, was to sort of give a little bit of information and direction as to what kinds of characters that each of these super blocks could have. We will go back just for a minute to the agricultural map for all right. Well, rather than that, let's look at our handouts.
Old fashioned.
Mr. President. Yeah. Okay, look at the map on page 5. And if you look at what I would call super block E to F, the frontage is the community park, and behind the frontage is almost entirely large lot equestrian land use parcels. And I think that this is a good start for the creation of an equestrian neighborhood plan for that super block. If you look at, if you go one super block to the west, looking at D to E, you can see that there is commercial, some commercial on the frontage, and all of those small lots, small one-third of an acre lots. And behind these small lots, we have some large grazing and ornamental nursery parcels. It's possible that the residents in that neighborhood could get together and say, okay, we want to continue the residential theme, and we would like to incorporate some policies in the comprehensive plan that would allow us to create lots smaller than 5 acres. That the residential character of that area is essentially small lot residential at this point. The residents may feel that we don't necessarily need to restrict property owners to 5 acre lots. Maybe we can allow 2.5 acre lots back in there to give property owners some additional opportunities to make use of the lands. I'm looking at probably at the grazing lands as almost an interim use where property owners might be interested in holding that property until some development opportunities that become available. Now, whether or not smaller lot subdivisions is something that the town is willing to consider, I don't know. That's a possibility. Just looking at the character of that area, there's already a bunch of small lots. Should we allow the continuation of that trend?
Jim,
yeah.
Doesn't the town have a policy to at least let these landowners consider combining together under some sort of an aggregation format?
When they mean the small lots?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's possible, except that almost all of those lots are already developed with residential units on them. I mean, that's possible that they could do that, but pretty unlikely, I think. I mean, and I'm just throwing out some ideas to try to create a little discussion. I mean, if you guys want to throw me out the window for suggesting that, then that's fine. Just tossing out some alternatives that might be worthy of discussion. Now, moving farther to the west, looking at the C to D superblock. One of the items that strikes me, if you look on the west side of C, that's where that large multiple land use project is. And that project is going to consist of retail, office, and assisted living facility, essentially assigning non-residential land uses in the entire area from Southern Boulevard up to Collecting Canal Road, and essentially changing the entire character of that lot, and certainly affecting the character of the properties on the east side of C. So should we then take that into consideration and maybe draft some policies that allow the properties on the east side of C to petition for land uses other than the current residential? So those are the kinds of issues that we're hoping that the residents, property owners of these super blocks can get together and to think about. Also, yeah.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to
Sure,
interrupt
that's
you.
right.
Is that something that we could discuss tonight about doing
Sure.
that area?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
Because the fact that the property to the west has already been designated, as you said, it would affect our property from a residential standpoint, so if we could make that tie in, I'd like to see that happen personally.
Yeah. Now, we have a policy in the plan now that commercial development should be restricted to the areas south of Tangerine. However, that policy was made when the property on the west side of C was rural residential 5 in an AR zoning district. Since that changed the character, maybe a policy in that super block could be something to the extent that, all right, in this particular super block, in the areas on the east side of C, we'll consider extending commercial or other non-residential uses farther north than so, as I said, the reason why I included the existing land uses was to give property owners a feel for what the character of their areas currently are and how the character will be affected by land use decisions that the council has already made.
It's very, very helpful what you've got up there. It's the first time I've been able to see that.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just curious, what was the impetus, the influence in changing this whole block to commercial to start with?
A property owner, there's one property owner that owns the whole thing. And he came in with a development proposal that he wanted to do some non-residential land uses. Now, that's 90 acres, and he realized right up front that he was not going to get 90 acres of commercial. So he came in with a development concept to do some commercial along the southern frontage, and then to do an assisted living facility towards the rear of the property. We didn't have a land use category that would allow all of that to be done under one application. So we created the multiple land use category to accommodate that mixture of 3 different land use categories. At the same time, prior to the Palm Beach State College, the property owner on the west side of B, which was one property owner as well, came in for a mixture of land uses at the same time. So there was actually those two large 90-plus acre parcels came in together, asking for 3 land use categories each. We didn't have a land use category to accommodate it, so we created the multiple land use category, which allowed more intensive uses along southern and less intensive uses up towards Glen Canal.
What is the land? I'm sorry.
Is the way that Waxahachie is going to go to protect the rural equestrian community, or is it to start punching holes of commercial property in places where it never existed before? And curiosity is that because one landowner came and asked you to do that, does the entire community want that to happen? Why do you need all of this extra traffic and extra commercial space in Waxahachie? And right down the road at Forest Hill and Southern, there's a big shopping center that's got plenty of vacant space in it. You know what I mean? There's a shopping center right down the street with plenty of traffic. Do we want to drag all that traffic into Waxahachie and change the color of the way the community has been for all of these years? If the majority of the community says, yes, I'm all for it, but because one guy came and asked for it, does that mean that the town should just roll over and give it to him without anybody else's input?
Well, I certainly,
Just curiosity.
well, to make the statement that the town rolled over is a
Okay, that might be
is a
bad
tremendous,
choice of words.
yes, it was.
But was this done with any consideration for the community and their desires to have this thing punched into the rural equestrian community? Or was it just a decision of the town and the owner of the property who asked for it?
The applicant made a request. The town council voted for it. the process that property had to go through encompassed over 2 years. Probably 10 plus public meetings. It went to the local planning agency, planning commission, multiple times, multiple workshops. The project was massaged over time. The town got a lot out of that approval. Number one, it got a 300-foot buffer along the north end of the property where the developer is going to put in a series of equestrian trails, which is a high priority for the county, and that likely would not have happened without this property owner's participation. B Road is going to be surfaced all the way between Southern Boulevard and Okeechobee as a condition of approval. Well, I mean, I was talking about just improvements in the Southern Boulevard corridor then. But as part of this approval, it's going to be surfaced all the way up to Okeechobee. And it's going to incorporate a community center where that's going to be available for town events. So I mean, the town got a lot. I mean, the town did not roll over. It went through extensive public comment and review, and it was a give and take. I mean, the developer got some of what he wanted. The town got some of what it wanted. And that's the process that all of these projects have to go through.
Nobody's going to jump up in the end and say, I didn't know the college was coming.
True.
I think now you would say.
Yeah, that's for sure. So that's what we're hoping to generate by this and any other workshops that may come up in the future is to try to create interest in these super block areas for how do you get back to okay, a lot of these topics, we have individual policies in the comprehensive plan that sort of address these issues in a carte-blanche manner all the way across the border. By the discussion and the presentations we've had about different land use characteristics in these different super block areas, there isn't necessarily one policy that is going to address these issues in each of those super blocks. And that's why we're promoting that the residents of the super blocks get together so that we can come up with specific policies that can address these issues on a more localized basis. Come up with reasonable land use patterns and reasonable solutions to each of these issues in those areas, and give the residents, landowners in these areas a real opportunity to jointly come up with a plan for the future of their area. Are there any other questions?
Now, how about we get some comments?
Yeah.
Tell us what you think. What you'd like to see.
Well, I always thought that being a town and a new town and all, that doesn't show that, to me, that anybody, can look at a map and they don't say, well, we want this to be commercial, we want this to be light industrial, they have no plan, it seems like to me. Nothing whatsoever. Nobody seems to be able to say, let's make a plan, let's have some guts out here and do something about this. Instead, it's whoever comes in there with the big bucks and the big planning agency spends all this money to get something done. A lot of guys don't have that kind of money, okay? But the town has really never said, what are we gonna do? How much commercial do we need? Do we need light industrial? Do we need a heavier populated area? None of this has ever come out of this town, ever. They don't lead you anywhere. And then when you bring up something, you get jumped on by everybody, and everything else. To me, the town should decide how they want the town done. This is why they became the town.
Well, I would agree with you from that standpoint. I mean, the current comprehensive plan is woefully inadequate as it relates to policies both on Southern and Okeechobee, the two major boulevards. Now, Southern has a few more policies than Okeechobee, and that's what town council has tasked us into doing. But you know, we're looking at policy language. And the policy language would probably lead toward greater planning efforts, which I think is what where Jim is going with that when he's talking about the super blocks, for example, along Southern. The approach on Okeechobee is completely different.
You don't have any super blocks. The block between E and F, that's basically done. You got a park in front, you got a question, that's done. You got the block between D and E. It's basically only a little bit in the front, a little bit in the back, and it's cut in the middle with a bunch of little homes. That's gonna really kind of mess that one up. So you don't have a whole lot as a town to look at to make a decision on it, and yet nobody makes a decision on it. And I'm not blaming you personally, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, here you look at these maps and there's a splotch here and a splotch here and a splotch here, and somebody got something multi-unit use way up here. It makes no sense. There's no conformity to it.
Well, part of that in the planning process is also, I think Mr. Ryan or somebody may have mentioned it, it's a product of land assembly or agglomeration of parcels. Come upward from it. It gives people who have maybe a small parcels an opportunity to be part of something bigger.
No, I agree with that. But here's the thing is, people voted to be a town. And the town always said, we're gonna have commercial in Southern. But the town has never really dictated how this should be used. And what that leaves open is whoever comes in with a big buck, even leaves open a possibility of somebody greasing the pole under a table on what it becomes. And I think the town should say, this is how we want it done.
Well,
Because that's why you became a town.
okay, well, that's, I mean, by incorporating policies into the comprehensive plan, that will be the town's statement. But we're suggesting that we get a little bit more specific in that regard by asking the property owners in these areas what they think and what they would like to see, what they see their future as. And then we would take it to the town council would incorporate that as the town's statement into their comprehensive plan. So it's the same process that you're talking about, except that we're trying to take it one step farther by having more participation on the part of the actual property owners in these smaller areas.
And I think to accommodate what these folks are talking about, that's why I was speaking earlier about changes to the future use map, because our current future use map is our current uses. So it's not really a future use map, it's a current use map. And rather than go through and, if there could be an expedited process, maybe a process of where the super blocks are asked to meet and the people get together and indicate to y'all what they're looking for, so you could at least tell the council what it is that they want. In many of these cases, in the C to D one, there's probably only 15 landowners in the whole area. And as Lee mentioned, in the D to E, there is the strip through the middle, but the people that own most of the land are probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 entities that would probably like to get together and talk about how to make it sensible, because we don't have any ability to really buffer the residential along Tangerine. So what are we going to do with that if we're going to build commercial along through there? How are we going to make up for that? And without some sort of, as y'all are talking about, the super block planning, I don't think you're going to get there. And one thing was brought up earlier about where can land be. There's 2 pieces that if you accumulate them, you have the C to D super block has probably 80 to 90 acres of vacant land and just a few homes. And the other one, the D to E, is similar in size. So they're in scope as big as the solar sports, project or the college, whatever, Publix, whatever they're calling that shopping center there. But, also with these commercials, I'm really seeing that there's some smaller residential areas that aren't like in Tangerines, like where I live, that's just gonna be overwhelmed by commercial and by Tangerine and cut-through traffic and all these things that, you know, even people with smaller lots are gonna need an option other than living in the middle of a parking lot. So I hope you all will consider that also.
The fact, excuse me, the fact that they have the multiple use on west of Sea Road, okay, and it goes all the way back to the collecting canal. And I don't know what agreement's been worked out as far as the buffers along collecting canal. I know you said it was later commercial use as you go towards collecting canal. And the possibility of intertwining that northern section with that to buffer. If you're gonna have a northern section that's gonna be along collecting canal, that it's gonna be less commercialized, somehow or other try to tie that in from there up with a light commercial type of situation.
Yeah, well, that particular project has a 300-foot buffer
300, okay.
as a requirement.
Okay.
And that's where the developer is going to be actually constructing some horse trails in there. And that's one of the benefits to the town that you have of planning for large parcels. If 90 acres comes in all at once, regardless of whether or not if it's 1 acre, I mean 1 owner or 10, if you can plan for the entire 90 acres, the town can generate some tremendous benefits, public benefits, from planning for areas that large.
And that's the same aspect that you're trying to do with the super block idea, same
Yeah.
type of situation.
Yes. I mean, see if there's a way to get the property owners to come up with a plan for that area, and in the process, the town can generate some benefits as well. How do you feel about this super block planning idea? And super block might not be the right term, but it's just an area. It's just a way of identifying geographical areas that either are constrained by certain roadways or physical features, and most of them, as we have shown, most of the potential super blocks do have similar characteristics. I mean, or principal characteristics that help define that block, and it can be used as a basis for coming up with a plan.
I think it's this gentleman here, I'm from a little bit in Pompano Beach and so forth. None of that took place, okay? And there was no communication with the homeowners. I think what you're doing is an excellent idea, and you're giving the people that actually own the land a chance to have their say, to be able to say, I'd like to see this happen. If it's for the benefit of the community and the benefit of the owner, that's a great idea, which earlier days, 50 years ago, that didn't exist.
For example, I mean, just in terms of just trying to generate some discussion, I mean, you see that 2 of the blocks are already going to collecting canal. What would you all think about a plan that kind of had the heavier or more intensive commercial along Southern, but allow those property owners that are going northward to collecting canal to also have an opportunity to maybe have a lesser intense commercial?
I think that would be along the lines of what the community is trying to create, because if you're going to have a 300-acre area in the back there in the north to have that equestrian trail, then somebody with a commercial type doctor's office or something of that nature that would fit in with the community, I think would be an excellent idea. You're certainly not going to put an Arby's or a McDonald's back in there, that sort of thing, but something along the lines of light commercial that would be attractive to that person. Fine.
Yeah. Now, one of the ways that we can address that is I've sort of come up with a little short list of some of the proposed development projects that have come into the town recently that we've had to deny at a staff level because they're more commercial than the town's AR zoning district currently allows, but they're uses that are fairly consistent with the town's rural agricultural character. And I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll go through a couple of them just to see what you think. And these are the kinds of uses that we could make changes to the agricultural zoning district itself and allow a little bit more intensive uses without actually assigning commercial land use categories to the properties that are more towards Western. Okay, the first one was a combination of, it was a business that wanted to put in paddocks, stables, riding rings, and recreational vehicle spaces to use as a seasonal business, horse training business for the horses that are competing in the Wellington equestrian events. Portions of that use are consistent with our AR district, but putting in RV spaces and 20 or 30 parking spaces is not. So we had to say, okay, well, you can't do that. But that's a business that could be consistent with the types of uses that currently exist in Wksp Grove. We could amend the AR zoning district to allow uses like that. And if we need to get specific, we can make them conditional uses so that they would have to locate in this area in the Southern Boulevard corridor. Another business that wanted to come into town was a business that constructed and maintained horse arenas and equestrian facilities. They wanted to have their offices, their storage, and their workshop. And in addition to that, they wanted to build an equestrian arena that they would lease out for equestrian events. They wanted to build a derby field and have a rental barn for local equestrian events. Again, some of those uses are uses that could be allowed under our code, but the construction and maintenance business would not be allowed in the AR district. That's another use that is fairly consistent with the equestrian nature of some of the areas of the collecting canal vicinity. We had another business, a restaurateur in Palm Beach County wanted to create a vermiculture operation, which is a worm farm where he would bring the vegetated or the organic waste from his restaurants feed them to the worms, and he also wanted to bring in his waste glass, grind up the waste glass, mix it with the castings from the worm farm, and create a soil amendment. That was another one that part of the business, permaculture, we checked with the agricultural extension service. That is a bona fide agricultural use. But bringing in the glass, grinding it up and mixing it, we had some serious concerns about that. So we had to tell him that was not allowed use. That's another potential use that we could amend the code to allow that kind of use. And finally, we had a business come in that wanted to bring in vegetative wastes and mixed barn waste and create a processing facility where he would create a recycled fertilizer and soil amendment and recycled stall bedding for the equestrian industry. Again, that was something that was not allowed under the code. That's one that has some potentially serious environmental concerns.
Something
We may not, we may not want to allow that, but I just brought that up as just a small indication of the different inquiries that the town staff gets almost weekly on businesses that sort of fit with the character of the town, but are not allowed based on the specific application of the standards of our ordinances. So there are some commercial opportunities that we can incorporate into our codes that might even fit in our agricultural zoning districts and not necessitate us assigning commercial land use categories. Again, those are the kinds of issues that we would like to be addressed when, if and when the residents of a super block get together to talk about what they want to do and the uses they want to allow in their super block.
It's all about options too. I mean, there was another use that Braden dealt with. It was on F or E, Braden?
Which one?
100 units?
That was on F road.
F, they had like 20 acres, and of course they wanted to do 100 units now. Under the town's comprehensive plan, they can only do 4 units. And that might not be the appropriate spot, because that was, no, I think it was north of Hudson Canal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But along Southern, if it's part of the planning in a super block, that might be appropriate. Because you can control, the density is more appropriate, you can control that. But again, it's about giving options and it's about trying to limit some things. Like you certainly don't want to see Southern stripped. So that, you have smaller parcels and you have a typical variety of fast food establishments and banks and things like that, because that's going to be the same old commercial that you see a lot throughout South Florida. But the super block planning, like I think right now the 2 projects that we have, the Locks Grove Commons and Locks Grove Center and the college, they plan out nice. I think that's going to set a nice standard for the rest of the town to at least generate some additional growth and development. Southern Landings wants to come in with a plan amendment, correct? They told you that. And, that's an office development right now, but they seem to think that in order to make it work in this market, they're going to need to add some retail to it. So they're going to be coming in for a plan amendment. And their piece is kind of long and rectangular. What
Right next door?
right next to the park. Going northwest. So if you added some more land to that, all of a sudden you open up some options. So,
Yeah, that's number 14 on page 8.
again, I'm just tossing things out for you to react and to give us the input we need at this point.
That's approved for a professional office complex now. And they made some inquiries about potentially changing that, so they have some more options for tenants.
We're gonna have the pond right next to them.
Yeah. Are there any other comments or
More questions?
questions?
Our job's real easy, as you can see.
Yeah, we certainly were expecting a little bit larger turnout.
I think got a lot of people doing hopefully.
Yeah.
But that input has to come back some way, somehow.
Yeah, make sure that you fill out your questionnaires and get them back to the staff. That's going to help.
So I guess if there are no further comments, then we'll adjourn. Going once, going twice. Have a good evening. Thank you for coming out. Appreciate it.